Okay, so yeah, you'll get a note on your intranet news panel before the upgrade happens. After your site gets upgraded, all you need to do to make sure that everything works properly on your end is just to remember to clear out your cache in the browser of all the various machines that you access Koha on. All right, so with that, let's dive into some of our new administrative features. A lot of this is stuff that you will have seen if you did attend previous webinars, since admin kind of drives a whole bunch of different other modules within Koha. But hopefully we can get into a little more detail here as we'll have a little more time to go into it. So first off, and this is one that I think is really exciting, we've got a new table being added to Koha to store account offsets data. So I'm going to go show this to you in a couple places. First off, I'm going to go to reports. So this table is not yet visible in the staff client just by looking at a patron record. That's coming up in a future release. There's a bug for that already to add that direct staff client access to this data. But for now, it is a table that you can access through a report. So I'm going to go to saved. I wrote a little report for this. Account offsets. Oh, you know what I forgot to say as I was getting started here and fiddling around with my computer. If you do have any questions as we go along, we've got a Q&A box you can use to put those questions in, or you can feel free to post them in the chat. If you do use the chat, make sure you're sending that message to all panelists and attendees to make sure that we can all see it. And Kelly is here with me. She's going to help field those questions and make sure I don't miss any of them.
Yes, I am.
Thanks, Kelly. Kelly's also here to quietly tell me in IRC that folks really can hear and see me. Okay, so here's my account offsets report. I wrote it to ask for a borrower number, so we'll give it mine. So the exciting thing about account offsets is it's saving history of every specific interaction with the patron account. So every specific payment, how much that payment was, and what account it applied to. So previously, you would see a fine on the account up until that fine was paid off. It would always show you the current balance of that fine, but wouldn't link specific payments to specific fines. So if we look in this report at the lines for the lost item Familiar Birds of America, we can see that that was an $18 fine with a $5 processing fee, and it got paid off in 3 installments, $7, $5, and then $11, and it gives me the date and timestamp for each of those. This is not the most exciting example because they were all within 2 minutes of each other. And this gives us a lot more. Will this go back prior to the update? No, unfortunately it won't. Koha wasn't keeping this information in any way previously, so it's going to be only going forward. But it's a good new feature, a lot of new information. So yeah, right now it's only available here. Ed says he's trying to see how this can be used with daily cash report. I'm not quite sure. What does your daily cash report do? What, like just a report of payments received, or? Yeah, it would be good for that. I mean, it would show you absolutely how much fine money was brought in each day. You could just write a report that says, give me all credits and debits in the accounts offset table with date of today or yesterday, or whenever you're running that. If you're running it at the end of the day, you would just say for current date. Claims returns will interfere. Yes, if you're doing claims returns such that they do apply a charge, well, you say, oh no, they won't. Yeah, folks do claims returns in a few different ways. If they're creating a charge that'll show up here. What if you delete the lost record? When you say delete the lost record, do you mean delete the lost item? That wouldn't change anything here. You'd still have the item and or record. Yeah, you'd still have the title and the barcode. These aren't live links, so they're just recording that as it existed at that time. So even if one of these, if I went and deleted Familiar Birds of North America out of the catalog, that title and barcode are still going to show here, so I'll still be able to see what this was for in the past. There just won't be really a record exactly. All right, and I'm anticipating Ed's question. This is already on the wiki, so if you want this report, you can go have a look at it. Does it have to be done by individual borrower? Is there a global option? Yeah, you could absolutely write a report that would pull everything out of the account offsets table for a date range. I just wrote this particular one to look at a specific borrower because that was sort of the use case that came to mind for me. If you wanted to get tricky, you could certainly figure out a way to separate this by branch too. See which branch the borrower number is attached to. Actually, branch might be in account lines. Anyway, when you want to get started playing with this in reports, feel free to give us a ticket, and we can help you figure that out. And in a future release, I think 1805, Kelly, is that correct?
Or I can find out for you.
There will be, over in the actual patron record, some more interaction with this. Let me pull up. So if we look at my account through circulation, this screen here is going to be updated to incorporate all these specific bits of information. So any of these individual fines I'll be able to click on and see the history of specific payments to it. So that's coming up. For right now, we just have it through reports.
Yes, Andrew, it's bug 2696 and it is pushed to master for 1805.
Okay, so that'll be hopefully coming to everybody in the fall. All right, the next thing I've got, thank you for the link there.
You're welcome.
The next thing I've got is enforcing password complexity. So this is a new system preference, let me pull it up while I talk, that will allow you to require everybody in Koha to have a stronger password. Double check what this is called. That'll do. It's just strong passwords. That might have given it a bad keyword. So require strong passwords, which we have on here set to require. I know several people have asked. The default for this, as we push this upgrade out, is going to be to have this setting turned off. So if this is not something you want, don't worry, it won't be turned on for you. But what this does is, whenever anybody tries to change their password, it requires that password to contain one digit, one lowercase letter, and one uppercase letter. This does interact a bit with the password length system preference. So there's a separate system preference that I'm going to not, there we go. Min password length. Right now, our system is set to minimum password length of 3. So if you made a 3-character password, it would have to be specifically a letter, an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, and a number. So let me jump over back to myself and show you what this looks like. Now, this isn't pushing itself back to any existing passwords. So if you turned this on, all your patrons who already had a password saved that didn't meet this requirement, it's not going to make those invalid. But if they tried to change their password for any reason, it would come into play then. So if I go to my record and I click change password, it doesn't tell me right away that it's going to need to be matching a certain requirement, but as soon as I start to type in here, my little autocomplete gets in the way, it's going to tell me must be at least 3 characters and include uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. We'll see the same thing on the Opac. If I log myself in here, and then change your password. Right off the bat, it gives me the must be 3 characters long. And then as soon as I start to type anything, it pops up to tell me must contain at least 3 characters, including uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. And I know we within Bywater just had a conversation the other day about whether or not we could make this always show up, just show up right from the start. That might be something we can force if that's something you want. Yeah, if you're interested in that, check with us. I think we had an answer for that, but I'm not certain off the top of my head. You will also see this if the patron uses the forgotten password reset email, which you may or may not have turned on in your system. If you allow patrons to, and I'm going to log out so I can show you what I mean. If you use this link here that sends an email to the patron asking them to reset their password. Actually, I generated one of those for somebody. Zaphod Beeblebrox here. So if I go to that password reset website, again, it doesn't show me right away. I'll have to I should probably pay attention to what I'm typing here so I get it to match. When I try to submit that, it's going to give me an error that tells me specifically why it failed. So we've got a little difference in display between areas. If you turn that on, which again, it's a mixed blessing. Some folks are going to be really excited about being able to require that. That requirement is going to apply to all of your staff as well as all of your patrons. So I guess I would say don't turn it on willy-nilly. Make sure that's something you want to pursue, because it is, yeah, it's going to add some complexity. All right, next up, we've got a new option in for cataloging to give the option to set separate mark organizational codes for your separate library branches or separate libraries within your system. And this is going to be defined in administration, libraries and groups, and then within each of these branches, if I click edit, scroll down here, mark organizational code. So previously, there was one system preference that applied to all locations within your system to put in that default mark org code in your mark records. Now have the option, if you do have one or more libraries in your system that have a different mark org code, you can set that here. If you've got a default for the branch, it's going to use that instead of the global default. If I leave this blank, it'll roll over to that system preference and use whatever I have in my system preferences. The next thing I want to talk about, I can't really show you because it relates to Google authentication, which we don't have set up here. but I can link you to the bug if any of you are using Google authentication. Nope. There we go. Okay. So this is, like I said, we can't show it here because we don't have Google authentication, but this is an enhancement that will look at the patron's email address when they try to log in with Google authentication. And if that's not registered as the primary email address on an existing patron in your system, it will automatically register that patron to allow them to log in. If you are a library that uses Google authentication and that doesn't quite click for you, I would say open a ticket and we can look at that in more detail. It's a hard thing for us to really play with because, again, we don't have Google authentication set up. Next up, I'm going to bounce back to reports. If you remember back in 1611, there was a change to how some tables were arranged that required some updating of SQL. It was a change to the mark metadata was moved out of the biblio items table into the biblio metadata table, and there were a bunch of reports that needed to get updated. Koha has a tool to automatically update SQL in cases like that, and we've got a new enhancement here that makes that just a little prettier, a little more user-friendly. So here's old mark query format. So there's this update column here that when Koha detects something that looks like it's using that old biblio items mark XML field, gives you a little updater. Previously, it gave you just two big boxes of text. Now it gives you a little color coding, kind of makes it a little easier to see what it's going to change. Hopefully, at this point, all of your old reports have already been updated. But if you've got some kicking around that still need a little work, this will make that easier. Though, of course, you also can ask us to look at them. The next thing on my list here is a nice change to the statistics table to make it save a little more data. The statistics table is now including shelving location for every checkout or renewal or check-in. Basically, it's recording the item's shelving location every time it saves a statistic. So the thing that immediately occurred to all of us that would be helpful about this would be tracking down items that were checked out from your displays, because this is going to look not at what the item's current shelving location was, because I know a lot of folks have regularly changed that shelving location from display once that item gets checked out or when it comes back. But this is going to save what it was at the time of checkout. So I'm just going to cast a wide net here. We don't have a lot of checkouts in our system. So the statistics table is a little blank. So you can see these are the books that were checked out in that date range while they were set to display. And this did catch a couple of things that were not checkouts, just because I told it to look at all items in the statistics table. If you wanted to narrow that down to only issues, which are checkouts, you could do that. Next up, we've got a little change to the self-checkout that just gives a little customizability. I'm going to go to Administration and to the SCO main user block. This is going to look kind of familiar if you've played around with Opac customization much, but this is just an HTML box that lets you put some more information into your Opac. So it gives a little thing here. You can put in any HTML you want. Let me open up the Opac and show you what that looks like. So where that shows up. Or not the Opac, but the self-check specifically. So I put in this text. This is the main user block. So if you need to put any sort of self-checkout instructions, I also added a dinosaur, because who doesn't want a dinosaur on their self-check? This is the things I do when I play around in the site early in the morning. So, thanks, Kelly.
You're welcome.
It's hard to make jokes to a room full of people who are muted.
I know.
All right, next up, we've got some new options for replacement costs and processing fees by item type. So we're going to jump to main administration and then item types. This feature lets us set a default replacement type, or sorry, default replacement cost. Thanks, Victoria. Default replacement cost.
She's laughing.
By item type. So if we put a value in here, like our audiobooks have replacement cost of $50, anytime a patron loses an audiobook, they will be charged that default price, unless that audiobook has a specific replacement cost in its record. So Koha is always going to default to the most specific replacement cost. It'll grab it from the item if it can. If there's nothing there, it rolls to the item type replacement cost instead. Related to that, we also have a processing fee. So if you want to say, whenever someone pays to replace an audiobook, we're going to charge them $8 in processing. Maybe that varies between item types because some item types require more processing. Looks like we're set to charge $12 for a lost board game. That makes sense. Board games are fiddly and require a lot of processing. So these show up as two separate charges on a patron record. Here, let's jump back to me because I know I got charged a processing fee on that bird book that I lost. Go back to my list of fines. There we go. Processing fee of $5 for the lost item, Familiar Birds of North America. So there's two parts of setup for this. There's what we were just looking at in the item types to add the numbers there. There are also some system preferences to turn on. Pull those up real quick here. The first is use default replacement cost. This is just a yes or no to use or don't use. So you'll want to turn this to use and put numbers in those item type defaults. The second is processing fee. Processing fee note. This is what controls that message that showed up in the account lines to specifically flag this processing fee. You don't have to put anything here. It just makes that a little clearer in that account lines of where that fee came from. Next up, I'm going to bounce over to the circ and fine rules. So we've got our big circ and fine table that we all know is a little bit too large to use on most monitors. And it has traditionally been a bit of a headache that you have to go all the way to the right side to find these action buttons, which usually means you're trying to follow a specific line over. And then if you're me, you click the wrong line and it's not fun. So we've added action buttons over on the left side. So you can click these here and edit a specific line without worrying about going all the way over there and clicking the wrong line on accident. Next up, we've got a change to how shelving location is shown in the holdings detail page in the Opac. So let's, oops, I missed. Let's grab a book here. Oops. Sometimes I feel like I should make more effort to vary the examples I use, but I don't know, I just start typing and Batman's the first thing that I go to every time. I've checked this particular Batman 4 Adventure Stories book out many times. Okay, so by default here, for most of your libraries, you're probably seeing shelving location as a little italicized line right under home library. I'm wondering if either we have that turned off entirely here, or this book may not have a shelving location. That seems unlikely. So we've got a new system preference that's going to let us change how that shows up. It is called Opac Location on Detail. Oh, okay. I think I know what happened here. Okay. First off, you have a choice. Do you want to show which branch? And then you have a choice, Opac Location on Detail. Do you want that shelving location to show up below both home and holding branches, below the holding branch, below the home branch, or on a separate column? On a separate column is probably going to be the clearest for your patrons. Here, let me push it back to underneath these two. Reload my page. So I may have just grabbed a book that doesn't have a shelving location. Let me back up.
Does it have a showing location?
Mysterious.
Check your column configuration.
Yeah, so that's the next thing. If you set this to on a separate column, we've got another new feature. Open this up in a new tab. So we now have the ability to configure which columns show up in this item detail page in the Opac, in this holdings table. So if I go to, over in administration, configure columns, way down toward the bottom on the right side, we now have in here, in the Opac tables, Biblio detail, the ability to turn all of these columns on or off. And shelving location is not hidden.
That's weird.
All right. I'm just picking bad examples, I think. Let's do it this way. Just, what happened, Batman Race Against Time? Well, sorry, I'm just giving something a shelving location so it'll show up. There we go. We just have books hanging around without shelving locations. Grab that bib number. Oh, phew. The system works.
I was like, please let it be there because I know it should be.
So that was a long way to show you. You can now put that in its own column. You can put shelving location in its own column to make that a little more clear. And then you can also, oh, I moved away from the page. You can configure which columns show up here. So if maybe you don't care so much about showing home library all the time, you only want to show current location, you could just hide this home library column entirely. Or any of these other ones that your patrons don't care about so much, or you just don't want to show there. I know, like item barcode, some libraries love showing the barcode there. Some libraries think that just muddies the water. All right, the next thing we've got is another bit of data that Koha has just started collecting, and that is patron renewal date. So previously, Koha would tell you when a patron was created and when their card was going to expire, but it wouldn't save specifically when that card was renewed. That is now being saved in the borrowers table, so it can be grabbed with a report. So let me go. Got one that Kelly wrote here. Patrons with date renewed. So this is showing renewals within a date range. I'll just say April to today. And we had 3 patrons that got renewed in that date range. It shows me the date they were renewed, their name and card number. This is only saving the date of the most recent renewal. So it's every time they get renewed, it's going to overwrite that date. And it is specifically saving times at which that renew button was clicked. If you go in and manually change their expiration date, that's not technically a renewal, so it doesn't save a date stamp in here. Another change to patron records, we have increased the allowable length of card numbers. So previously, a patron card number could only be 16 digits long. This was an issue for some libraries, so it has been doubled up to 32 characters long. So if for some reason you need a really long card number, you can now go up to 32 characters. So I got 2 more things before we wrap up here. Next is more of a fix than an enhancement. The system preference subfields to allow for restricted editing. So this is a permissions thing that you can set library staff to only be allowed to change specific aspects of a patron record. That's been fixed. I'm not really going to show it because it doesn't show well, but if that was a thing you were using previously, that got broken in a previous release and is now working again. And then last, we do have a new system preference that needs a little bit of tweaking. There's a bug already in for it to make it work a little bit better. But we have a new system preference called block return of lost items. So we already had block return of withdrawn items. So you could tell your system that if somebody buys that withdrawn item out of the friend's book sale and then tries to give it to you to return, your system will refuse it. It'll just say, no, I'm not doing anything with that. That book is withdrawn. We can now block return of lost items. So if a patron comes and chucks a lost item in the book return or brings it to you at the desk, you can say, block that return. And this will stop that item from getting checked in. Let me grab, that's not what I meant to do. Let me grab my own account again, because I know I have a lost item on there. Can it be done by date since it was checked out? Do you mean, can you block based on how long ago something was checked out? Like, say, don't allow the return of anything that was checked out more than 2 years ago? No, that's an interesting idea. We could probably figure out a workaround for that, where basically anything that was checked out more than 2 years ago would go to a lost status, and thereby be blocked. We used to have a rule that would not accept lost items after a year. Yeah, that we could put in an enhancement request for that. Does this work with long overdue lost? Also, yeah. So it's blocking return of any lost status. But yeah, Karen, to go back to your question, I would say if you wanted to make this more specific, to say block return of lost items only if they've been lost more than a year, that would need to be an enhancement to add to the system preference a little bit. Just remembering which book I had checked out. Oh yeah, cakes. Okay, so let me grab this call number and I'm gonna check it out.
Or barcode, whichever you want to pull.
It's like a call number. So when I try to check this in, since I have that system preference set to block check-in, it cannot be checked in. So it is still checked out to me, but, and this is the part that we've already put in a bug to tweak, it did take that and change it from lost to found. So it interacted with the book somewhat. It changed it to found status, but it is, no, that's not, let's just reload the page here. But it's still checked out to me. Seems like that might work a little better if it just utterly refused the barcode and just said, I can't do anything with that, it's lost. It also would have, what does the item record show? Let me show you. It also would have refunded me that lost fee if my system preferences were set to refund lost fee when a lost item gets returned. It's not technically returning it, but it's changing from lost to found. And if I go to the item record, it now just says it's not lost, it's just checked out to me. And obviously this system preference won't really have any effect if your system preferences are already set to take an item off of the patron account as soon as it moves to lost. And I know a lot of libraries do that. If somebody's got something checked out and it moves to lost, it automatically ends that checkout. It returns the item and charges the patron. Okay, so that is all the admin and report stuff I had to talk about today. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff or other upgrade questions? Pausing for typing. It looks like perhaps not, which is not a great surprise since a lot of this stuff we did already cover in previous webinars, so you've probably seen it before. All of the reports that we showed today are up on the reports library on the Koha wiki. So if you want to grab those to tinker around with in advance of your upgrade, they're there for you to have a look at and copy and tweak. As I mentioned, these upgrades are going to start in early June. We'll let you know a week in advance. I think it'll be a good upgrade. Like, I'm excited about it. It's not anything that's going to drastically change workflows. It's just a lot of, or not anything that's going to drastically cause upheaval in your workflows. It's going to improve things, but you're not going to log into some page and suddenly it looks totally different. So that's it, I guess. I'm going to just hang around here in case anybody comes up with a question, but looks like we're wrapping up a little early. Thank you all for attending, and we'll be in touch as we get ready to upgrade your library.